Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Anime Brain Freeze. We are your hosts riding the waves of imagination.
I am John.
And I'm CC, and this is the show where we review all the anime series from the previous season we did and didn't watch start to finish. It's season finale time, everyone. At the point of this recording, the first few shows of spring season have already aired. And of course, we can't wait to take a look at all the new and big returning stuff. But before we dive into the sneak peek of spring and our review for the things we watched from winter season, we have two last series to discuss to properly wrap up fall season 2016. So we'll finish this episode with our review of the modern fairy tale Flip Flappers. But first, John is gonna dish out some fisticuffs with Vivid Strike.
Right, so first up today we're going to talk about Vivid Strike. And to talk about Vivid Strike, I can kind of boil down the story for you, but there's a lot of material that actually comes before this series as well that we haven't really touched on to date. So I'll give the plot synopsis of this show first, and then we can go far down the rabbit hole so you can see just how this show has an incredibly high barrier of entry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But I assume it's going to be it's another barrier or another form of barrier of entry compared to the show we're going to review, later in this show, in this episode.
Yes, because there's a lot more material that existed before this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Vivid Strike is all about these two girls, Fuka Levinton and Renee Berlinetta. And they're both these orphan girls, and they kind of live on the streets and have a very unfortunate existence. Eventually, Renee gets adopted and raised by a very affluent family, and she begins studying the martial arts. And there's this altercation between Renee and Fuka, and leads to them just growing apart very quickly. Fuka's left in a funk, and she ends up becoming something of a hoodlum. She's just out there looking for trouble and getting into fights, and she's in a real bad spot.
Mm.
And she ends up picking a fight with this girl named Einhart Stratus.
That's a great name.
That is a name to remember.
Okay.
Einhart is yes, the fact that this girl's name is Einhart.
It's a girl.
Yes.
I thought it was a guy.
Yes. No.
This is a very masculine name, at least in terms of
incredibly masculine, because there's a whole lot of lore and backstory where she's the reincarnation of this warrior with the same name and blah 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 blah.
Oh. So it's kind of like a saber deal, maybe, where the name is kind of malish because the Arthurian legend was.
Yeah, or maybe I shouldn't say reincarnation. I say it's a name that's handed down.
Okay.
And there's
so it's a legacy thing.
Yes, basically. Yeah, Einhart is this other up and coming martial artist, and she kind of dishes out the pain train to Fuka. But says to her, hey, I see you're not having a great life. What if I help train you and I can get you someplace to stay? So Fuka takes up her offer and starts working at the Nakajima gym, and she has a part-time job there. She's given some room and board, and she starts training. And she finds that, in spite of her street smarts, as it were, she can't stand up against Einhart and any of her friends. So she has this very long road to redemption, as it were, where she wants to, better herself and then find the courage to stand face to face with Renee again and be able to reconcile their differences.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically the broad overview. Involves your typical shonen tournament fighting angle.
I'm all up for that.
But the fights are actually really cool and well animated, and which runs contrary to its previous series. We're going to talk about that in a minute.
So who did the animation for this then?
This show was done by 7 Arcs.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done all sorts of other stuff, such as all of the series that came before in the Nanoha line.
Mm-hmm.
Dog Days. I believe it did show Mushibugyo, which was another really cool high-action series. Original creator was Masaki Suzuki, who's created a lot of those same things I just mentioned, with the exception of Mushibugyo. It's directed by Junji Nishimura, who has actually directed some older stuff like Ranma Half, Urusei Yatsura. And music by Yoichiro Yoshikawa, who's done some other older stuff like Dominion Tank Police. So there's some legacy staff on this show, which is pretty cool. Now for the history lesson.
I'm all ears.
So, prior to Vivid Strike, there was, you may or may not have heard of, Magical Girl Lyrical Nanoha.
I've heard about it a lot, that it's a popular franchise and everything, but I've not seen any of it. Like, not at all. I don't even know what it's about.
Well, prior to that...
Okay.
Was this OVA called Triangle Heart. And Triangle Heart is only, like, tangentially related, and I can explain that very briefly. The main character from Nanoha is a girl named Nanoha Takamachi. Surprise, surprise. She has like this incredibly small bit role in Triangle Heart, where one of her relatives is like one of the bigger main characters in there. But that's kind of where they established Nanoha's character. I don't think it really bears any heavy research into that, mostly because that's just, oh, hey, here's where this character came from. Mm-hmm. She's not important there. Lyrical Nanoha has a story about a girl who becomes a magical girl. And there's no, like, oh, let's make a contract and blah, 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 sort of stuff in there. It's just, she runs across this boy who was transfigured into a ferret.
What? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
This boy, Scrya, and basically has all sorts of magic apparatus, and gives her the means by which to, help stop these dimensional alterations that are happening around the world and, across time and whatnot. And that's sort of where it establishes itself. Each successive series, like they introduce other characters, like my personal favorite, Fate. Later on, they introduce another girl, Hayate, who has like this magical grimoire that it's basically sapping her life force, and it makes her into an invalid.
One of those.
Yeah.
So immense power, but it comes at a price.
Yeah. Yeah, there was Lyrical Nanoha A's, which, by the way, if you don't feel like watching those 2 series, there are 2 summary movies that are amazing, and they cover all of the major plot points that you absolutely need to know. I mean, each movie is like 2.5 hours long, but...
Did they leave anything interesting out in terms of character development or something? Because I feel like...
Not really, actually.
That's cool, because I've watched, like, to catch up on Gundam and everything, or bring a friend up to speed on Gundam. I wasn't, I didn't want to watch the entire first series, so I watched a compilation movies of that, and I felt like those, I don't know, maybe that was also missing from the series, but I felt like those compilation movies left out a lot of character stuff that was necessary, and some of the story developments felt like, okay, now we're suddenly doing this, and now suddenly this happens, and it's like it always felt like something is missing. So I'm wondering, that's not the case for the Nanoha movies then? Which
is kind of weird, considering I think pretty much every one of the original Gundam series had 3 compilation movies each.
Yeah.
So you think there would be room for that? But no, I really feel like that with Nanoha movie first and second, they touched on all of the stuff they need to. Even some of the smaller stuff that I felt was important. I was like, oh, they're not going to put that in there. Oh my God, they put that in there.
Is the animation improved in some way, or?
Yes.
Because I remember doing that for the Gurren Lagann compilation movies, where they improved like the final fight, where it's basically just only keyframes.
Yeah, so 7 Arcs, I firmly believe they are, a really good studio. 7 Arcs on a movie budget is like, strap yourself in. It's going to be crazy.
So, okay, and great animation is fine, also, but is this more of an action-based Magical Girl show? Is it more like magic thrown around? Is it more like hand-to-hand combat? Because, in terms of what Vivid Strike is doing, I'm wondering is where does Nanoha itself go with its action?
We're getting to that.
Okay.
So in Nanoha A's and Nanoha Strikers, which a lot of people think Strikers is the black sheep of the family, and it has some weird story beats, I will agree. Mm-hmm. But we're not going to dive too far into that. But yeah, the first 3 core Nanoha series are very much high magical action sort of affairs. There's a lot of spell slinging and, stuff like that. So you get your fill of that very easily.
What can I compare it to? Like, is it a bit Madoka-ish in terms of, the battles that happen? Is it more Symphogear? Is it... I don't know. What would you compare it to? Or is it like it's a very unique thing?
I kind of feel like it's somewhere in between Madoka and Symphogear. Simply because I look at Symphogear, and even though, the characters are ostensibly magical girls, their weaponry really isn't.
Yeah, it feels more tokusatsu-ish.
I'd say it kind of bends the genre to be like techno magic girl.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say even then Madoka does some of the same thing with Mommy having like a fucking hand cannon and Homura with what she had, like pistols. Yeah.
Yeah, and bombs.
Yeah. So it's in between there because each of the characters has what's called an intelligent device that they invoke their transformation with and channel their powers through. So some characters have like like Nanoha has a staff. Fate, hers kind of changes between being like a scythe and a sword. So it has like a different form shifts it can go through. Strikers was the first series where they kind of started moving towards some of the characters have more. Well, one character in particular, Subaru, has more like hand-to-hand powers, where she focuses her magic into her fisticuffs, and that sort of laid the groundwork for Nanoha Vivid and Vivid Strike after that. So Nanoha Vivid and Vivid Strike are, obviously I've been trying to go in chronological order as much as I can because there's another series, Nanoha Force, and I think it's between Strike and Vivid. So, but yeah, it's more like, oh, hey, the world is mostly at peace. We're just going to have magically powered martial arts tournaments.
Okay, sure. Why not?
And that's basically what these intelligent devices have been more geared toward in Vivid Strike and Nanoha Vivid.
Do you need to watch both Nanoha Vivid and Vivid Strike do you need to watch all of Nanoha to get enjoyment out of Vivid Strike? Like, how much is that series depending on what came before it?
Well, 2 of the main characters in Nanoha Vivid, Vivio and the aforementioned Einhard, their first appearance is in Strikers. So that's kind of where you get, a lot of their big background. And then, the martial arts tournament hoo-ha starts in Nanoha Vivid.
Okay.
So I feel like I mean, could you jump into it? Yeah. Would you be confused on many of the characters? Yes. Very yes.
Okay, so I see what you mean by barrier of entry then.
Yes. If you want the full experience, you should go back to the beginning. But if you want to enjoy Vivid Strike in Nanoha Vivid, you'd probably need to go back to Strikers.
All right.
And even then, that's predicated on a lot of stuff before that.
But I mean, at least there are compilation movies that are pretty amazing, like you said. So that's shortening the stuff at least a bit. How many episodes do each of the series have? Are these 13 episode shows or 26 or?
They're all 12 or 13 episodes, except for Strikers, which I think was 25 or 26. I'm surprised they haven't done like a compilation for Strikers yet, but maybe that's next in line because, they did the compilation movies of the first and second series. There's another movie coming out called Reflection, and then who knows what's after that.
Okay.
Actually, I know what's coming up after that because there's the second series of Nanoha Vivid whenever that is happening.
Wait, a compilation movie for that second series, or the second series of Nanoha Vivid is coming after Vivid Strike?
Second Nanoha Vivid is coming after Vivid Strike.
Okay. This is getting complicated.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a pretty deep rabbit hole to go down.
So it sounds like Vivid Strike is more of a side story, and Nanoha Vivid is more like, the main continuation of the mainline story.
I really kind of feel like Nanoha Vivid is Nanoha in name only.
Okay.
Because she shows up, sure, but it is Vivio's story. Vivio, by the way, is the adopted daughter of Nanoha and Fate. So
okay. All right. So, but Vivid Strike is not, the main protagonist of Vivid Strike is not Vivio. So
no,
that feels
certainly Vivio is in Vivid Strike, but she is not the main player.
Might again be though in the second series of Nanoha Vivid.
Probably, I imagine.
All right. Okay, I'm seeing the picture here, but for everyone who at this point is super confused,
I'm sorry. I wish I had a camera set up so I could, grab my non-existent whiteboard.
Hey, if you want, we can put up a flow chart on our homepage.
That might be worth doing.
I have no problem with that. Sure. I mean,
I'll get working on that.
I can put that up with the YouTube video and everything. No problem. Only the people who are only downloading this podcast from iTunes and SoundCloud might have a problem. But still, anyway, I feel there's probably some material out there that helps you, understand where each series falls into the timeline and how much you actually want to see. But why not start with the compilation movies and see if you like that? You want to get further into the series. I would certainly be interested in checking out the compilation movies, but at least.
Yes, they are. They're so good.
But what is the thing that captivated you most about the series or, the franchise entirely? Like, were you at some point, well, I got into this, I'm just going to continue watching like I was with Naruto, even though I didn't really like it anymore, at least in certain parts? Or were you like, yes, this is absolutely my jam, and if so, why was that the case? Like, what is so interesting about this Magical Girl story that, other series, maybe didn't do better or more interesting?
So this is gonna sound a little goofy, but
that wouldn't be a first on the show for both of us. So
yeah, pretty much. But back before this even entered my realm of knowledge, this giant, huge lexicon of Nanoha's universe. I remembered hearing the song performed by Nana Mizuki called Eternal Blaze. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, this is pretty cool. What does it go with? Oh, it goes with this series Lyrical Nanoha A's? Huh. All right. So I kind of shelved that for a while, and then I keep, realizing that it was the second in its series. I just, was like, maybe someday I'll get around to watching it. And then one day I decided, you know what? Hell, let's just check out what this series is about. And I started watching the first series, and it just really grabbed me because I thought the characters were all really interesting. It has some neat story beats. And I just kept going and going, and here I am. Oh no. But yeah, no. The overarching narrative, like starting from the first series, where Nanoha is trying to befriend Fate because Fate's mother is not the greatest person in the world, and she has a lot of I feel like it's interesting stories, but I don't want to throw spoilers out there because there is the compilation movie, and it's really interesting to go watch. Okay. Even though the statute of limitations for spoilers would indeed dictate that the age of the show would say, hey, I could just throw it all out on the table here. And I guess the way I can say it is that Fate's mother, Precia, wants to resurrect her dead daughter. And it has some really dark moments like that, but there's a lot of moments of redemption throughout like several of the series, and one of the core elements is it's also become one of the jokes of the series is befriending. Like, let me put it to you this way: in Strikers, Nanoha becomes known as the White Devil because she is very ferocious and strong, and it's like one of the jokes, you're going to get friended.
Okay.
So yes, it is both the show's main theme and its own comeuppance.
This is not only for people who like magical girl shows, right? Like this sounds to me, especially in terms of where the later shows go, like this would be something up the alley of someone like me, who is a major, shonen fighting fan. Like it goes into that. Like you said, there's a tournament arc later on, so I assume this show would be up my alley just from hearing that, right?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a much more action-oriented story, but it does have some variance in its beats. So
okay, would you say there is enough character development, or does most of the cast stay the same, and they mix it up by introducing more and more characters to make, I don't know, make the dynamics more interesting and change it up a bit? So
I feel like there's a little of both, actually.
Okay,
because with each passing season, there's been obviously new characters, and there's obviously there's time between each one, so you get to see the characters grow and get to know each other better.
That's
and,
always
develop
that's always
themselves.
fun. That's always fun. Do they only grow do they only mature in emotional aspect, or do they become older as well and see different character designs and everything?
Both.
We have that's cool. I always like that when anime does that, when there's like this progression. Speaking of Naruto again, that's one of the things I liked about that show, where we really see those characters age. And I also liked it about Dragon Ball, from beginning to end, really joining a certain character on a journey through their life, from childhood to adulthood. Is always one of those really intriguing things to me that you didn't see as much in American cartoons or anything, and that I first time only really experienced when starting watching anime. And it was always one of those aspects of that medium that really, I don't know, that was really interesting to me, that really captivated me. So yeah, that's cool. That's cool to hear. That's another motivation for me to check out that franchise.
Yeah, just to give you an example, in the original series, Nanoha is 9 years old, and in Vivid, she's 23. So there is a large passage of time.
Oh yeah, well that's awesome. Great to hear that.
like I said, if you want to start from the beginning to see, where Vivid Strike took everything, it's it's a fun journey, a little bit of a long one, but I feel like it's worth it going from beginning to end. I should note, I don't remember if we've mentioned this previously, but the animation studio changed in Nanoha Vivid, and it kind of took a few steps down in that series.
Right, you mentioned that before, that you were pretty unhappy with it. Were it A1 or?
Yeah, 7 Arcs handed it over to A1 for whatever reason, and A1, they phoned it in. They phoned it in hard. So when Vivid Strike came around, 7 Arcs was like, hey, so we're just going to work on it instead, thanks.
Well,
but
that's relieving.
Aside from that misstep, as far as quality goes, it's been mostly pretty consistent. But yeah, like I said, it's a great journey from beginning to end. Feels like a huge cast of characters that, if you can't find one you don't like out of the bunch, I don't know what to tell you, man.
The story of Flip Flappers begins with one of our main protagonists, Kokona. She is a quite kind of reserved / introverted middle schooler who is living with her grandmother and her green pet rabbit thing. I can't even pronounce its name. Like it's Yuk Skull or something.
I believe it's Yuk Skull.
Yeah, something like that. It's written weirdly. It's pronounced weirdly. The Japanese doesn't help, so I don't know. It's
like I believe the name is derived from the name of a biologist, Jacob Johann Baron von Uexküll.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I remember explicitly looking it up while the show was running and finding that, and I was like, I don't understand the parallel, but okay.
Sure. The more you know. Anyway, so she seems to keep mostly to herself and living out her school days, and she's not really sure what she wants her future to be yet. She's a bit uncertain in that department, and maybe even a bit depressed about it because she doesn't really know what to do with herself. But her life takes a drastic turn for the weird when she runs into the air surfboard riding, contrary to herself, very extroverted, hyperactive pixie girl called Paprika, who is apparently totally smitten with her and takes the somewhat reluctant Kokona to a weird fantasy world-like dimension called Pure Illusion, where she is supposed to help Paprika hunt for special stones called amorphous that allegedly can fulfill dreams. Their mission is overseen by the mysterious organization called Flip Flap, and they send the girls on some truly bizarre journeys from here on out that will lead them to discover hidden truths about the people in their lives, their current selves, and later on, the story behind Pure Illusion itself and their own pasts. So, yeah, basic story setup for Flip Flappers. If that sounds already kind of crazy and weirdly obtuse to you,
it is.
It is, and that is also the barrier of entry for this show, because, well, let's get to that later. I want to first get into what is most striking, and what was the thing that attached me to the show from the beginning, and those are the visuals. The most striking thing about the show are the visuals. It's animated by Studio 3 Hertz, who have previously done Dimension W. Well,
your favorite.
Yeah, that's where I remember them from. Which a show that looked good in the beginning and just violently drove off the cliff later on, not only in writing but also in visuals. And at some point, I was afraid this would happen to Flip Flappers as well, but we get to that as well too. But yeah, they did the animation. And Studio Pablo, who were responsible for the art direction, at least for the first half of the series. Both of those crafted some really impressive surreal imagery that is totally captivating, in my opinion. Like, it's this really interesting, unique style. Also props to director Kiyotaka Oshiyama, who was an animation director on Space Dandy and a key animator on, for example, the Full Metal Alchemist movies and the Rockman X movie. Again, weird how that one is popping up everywhere now. I don't know why. It is weird. Anyway, yeah. So some production problems on later episodes aside, the show has a really gorgeous, unique look to it that was really enamoring from the beginning. It's kind of pastel-y. It has like this really interesting fantasy vibe, really colorful, and that, luckily, even though it stumbles somewhere in the middle, that it pretty much keeps that level of visual quality and excitement throughout its final episode. Like, there's some dips here and there, like I said, especially at some part in the middle or last third or beginning of the last third, but there are some really cool visuals and animation bits and fights and just, interesting backgrounds and like these real fairy tale worlds and designs and ideas thrown into the show, and it all looks really cool. Just artistic, interesting, a lot of the stuff you maybe haven't seen before in other anime, and yeah, just really cool stuff. I want to highlight the ending here of the show, not like the ending of the show itself, but the ending to each episode, like ending animation
sequence.
Yeah, exactly, with the song and everything, which has like this really interesting old school European fairy tale Brothers Grimm-ish, feel to it, which is not necessarily reflected in all of the show, but in certain parts definitely. And there was like something, and the song too that is played in the background, that felt like really interesting, unique, just in terms of atmosphere. And it's like, when I watched that the first time, I was like, okay, this is interesting. I wonder what this relates to in the show. And it really doesn't, but it's still cool. It's like, hey, here's something interesting you don't see every day in anime. And yeah, I had that feeling a lot of times in the show. Just in terms of visual style, again, and animation, everything, it kind of feels like a cool blend of a Kunihiko Ikuhara show by way of, talked about him before, Utena, Penguin Drum, Yurikuma, but also by the way of Hiroyuki Imaishi, Kill la Kill, Gurren Lagann, and later on a bit of Hideaki Anno, who probably everyone knows, from Evangelion and everything. So yeah, just you feel like the influence of those guys kind of everywhere in the show at some point, in my opinion, just from a visual standpoint. So yeah, strong stuff, just from an art and animation perspective. I assume that was also one of the things, besides me raving about the show, that got you into it in the beginning.
It was kind of the same deal as Izetta, where I kept seeing clips of it, and I was like, yeah, I gotta check this out. And then I got drawn in immediately. Mm-hmm. For all of the reasons you just mentioned, basically.
So, in terms of story, and I don't know how you have felt about this, John, but for the listeners out there, I think for you to enjoy this show, I think it depends on, or being able to enjoy this show, I think it depends on how well you can deal with a certain amount of obtuseness. And if you're fond of visual metaphors instead of actual plot, at least in terms of the first half of the show. Like, the show keeps the answers to all the questions that open up while watching, the crazy ride that each initial episode of that show is. It's keeping all those answers very close to its chest. Like, they're not a lot of real revelations in the beginning that make a lot of sense. There's a lot of, imagery thrown into the show that could mean a certain thing, but you can't be really sure. You don't know what of that imagery actually relates to the main plot, what of that is hinting at deeper themes that, relate to to other things, to the growth of the characters and everything. So you have to maybe have to do a bit of work to parse all that to understand certain parts of the show. Like, to get any guess on what's going on behind its surreal imagery, you kind of need to pay close attention. And I wonder if you had any problems with that in the beginning, if you felt like, okay, where is this going? Like, is this going anywhere at all? Did it matter if you had, were you just like enamored by the visuals? Or like, I don't care where this is going. This is just a blast to watch. I can take like another 10, 20 episodes of this fun fairy tale nonsense and just Kokona and Paprika visiting strange dimensions and weird fairy tale worlds, or were you like, okay, I hope this is going somewhere?
I mean, with every show I pick up, I hope that it goes somewhere. Otherwise,
But you didn't lose patience.
No, I didn't. I had, the understanding that, like I said, with most shows, they were trying to build towards something. So, just seeing the weird directions they were taking it in was really what, grabbed me. Because, some of the later story revelations were like, and really caught me off guard. But, that too was interesting. Yeah.
Like I said, it's in the beginning, it's a bit of I don't know, what a bit like what Lost did in US TV, where it throws like a bunch of weird shit at you, opens up a bunch of questions, and then you're like, well, this might lead to something, or maybe it doesn't. But in this show, there's also like this the subtext underneath that's like that relates to, like I said, the growth of the characters, some themes of coming of age, of love, of growing of a person, of self-realization, finding your way in life and everything. So that's in the imagery too. It's not all like hints dropped for later plot developments. So, just so you know, not everything in that show like has that you see in the beginning has to directly mean something. So don't like try to look at every picture and say, "Oh God, what does that mean in terms of the story? What is that?" And just maybe in the beginning let it wash over you, and later on, maybe even on a rewatch, try to be like, "Oh, okay, this is what this was hinting at, and this doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of everything, but it was still an interesting." I don't know, an interesting point of discussion, or something, an interesting metaphor for something else that the show wanted to say.
Yeah, otherwise you'll drive yourself nuts looking for imagery that's not there.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it takes until about episode 6 to even give you a somewhat solid idea about what pure illusion actually is. But that was definitely also the episode that pulled me really into the show on an emotional level. Like, this is, at this point it was like mostly, fantasy adventures and weird imagery. And now, and in episode 6, like, okay, this is what's actually happening when they go on these adventures. And now you learn where they are going and, how that relates to their real lives and everything. And that's super interesting. And then you have like these really emotional personal character story in that episode that really tugs at your heartstrings, like, and not in a cheap way. Like, I really, not on a level of personal experience or anything, but I really connected to that character story. And I don't know, that just worked to me. And there was a point where I was like, okay, this show is, going into a direction I really like, and I feel like there's definitely some merit, at least in the emotional stakes of this show. And even if this, the main plot and the main narrative doesn't come together at the end, if there are more episodes like this in the show, it's definitely worth the watch, not only for its visuals. Yeah. So I don't know. What was that? You said you were in it from the beginning, or was that maybe the point of the show where you also were like, okay, this has some really cool, good, like, meaty stuff to it.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty much it. Because I was just, I was interested in, the art direction, that was, probably the one big thing.
Yeah, as for me as well.
But then, when they actually got to, like you said, about that point, it was 5 or 6 episodes, and that's when, I felt like it was really starting to hit the fan, and, that was the point where it's like, we are in there, we're starting to, understand things a little more.
Yeah. Coincidentally, this is also the episode after which the head writer, Yuniko Ayana, left the show, apparently, which might or might not be the reason why a few episodes later the show changes from, mostly the surrealist thought exercises that, in talking about coming of age, self-realization, depression, love, and all that good stuff, to a lot more, plot-driven and straightforward dark fantasy magical girl story, with elaborating on the past of the characters and everything. So if you have a problem with, its vague and strange fairy tale narrative and, some of the more metaphorical nature of a lot of its initial episodes, that changes drastically in the later parts of the show.
The show apparently had like 4 different writers, so...
Yeah. The first half, the first 6 or 7 episodes were written by one, and then later on it got handed around. I think that was also the point where the art studio responsible for the art direction left, and that's also the point in terms of animation where you get some not so super backgrounds, not so great animation in certain parts, some reused scenes and backgrounds again. So I think the show suffered from a lot of problems behind the scenes. So it's kind of surprising how well it worked out in the end. Like I said, at that certain point when those things became noticeable, I was really afraid it would go the Dimension W route and just completely fucking crash and burn. But it didn't, and I'm really happy about that. So yeah, but if you have problems with, like I said, if you have problems with stuff in the beginning, how the show is structured and how it's presented, like I said, it becomes a bit of a different show in the end, just in terms of how that it's at the end it's really plot driven. Like one might say that's to its detriment in certain parts, because a lot of episodes become a bit of an info dump.
So, yeah, it's just the whole fanciful angle was good, but when they kind of had I think it was probably a realization that was like, hey, we need to work plot into this somehow, and that might have been the major point of contention.
Or it was like, we only have 13 episodes. We have something where we want to go, and we need to get to it to, wrap it up. I don't know. Certain developments feel a bit rushed and underdeveloped in the later parts of the show, because you get these massive info dumps in terms of, okay, this is what happens in the past, and now you got these characters, and this is elaborated on and stuff like that. And now you learn this about Kokona, and you learn this about Paprika. And I feel like in the beginning it was a bit more diversified in terms of, the stories that were told and, the stuff you saw in each episode. And like I said, later on it becomes super straightforward and just concentrates on, what... how the characters came to be and everything. It's not as whimsical anymore. It's not as, different anymore each episode. So it was a bit sad that had to happen, to bring the story to a certain point and to a certain conclusion. Because at the end I was kind of missing, that from the show. And I wish it could have stayed there a bit longer. It feels like this show needed or should have had more episodes than it did. Not necessarily spend the entire of its entire first half in just running around in fantasy world, but always have some of those episodes sprinkled in between again here and there, because it could afford to, which it couldn't in in this case, because there were not enough episodes. So, I feel like something that was really interesting up at the beginning parts of the show was missing at the in the final parts of it, just because it was so plot driven. Also, I feel like if they cut some of the fan service that they had in certain parts, or some of the unnecessary, underdeveloped characters, some parts of the show could have been, better developed, and because they would have had more time for that. But as it stands, I can't say if that would have improved the show. It's just my suggestion for how you could have gotten more out of those 13 episodes, because some of those characters you didn't need in that show and in that story. Why wasn't you even in this show? Like, I bet you were asking yourself the same question at the ending, because she was so. Why?
there were a few characters I was like, other than to try and drive the plot, why are you here?
Yeah, I feel like they feel like pure plot devices. Like, we need antagonists and we need a strong opposing force to Kokona and Paprika, so we need these characters. But aside from that, they have no character, no development whatsoever. They are just here, to be adversaries, and that's it. So that felt really lackluster, and it was like, okay, this is I wish there was more here. Just while we're at characters, I'd say Kokona and her childhood friend Yayaka are the most interesting and well-developed characters in this show. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. They at least are the most interesting, and get they have full arcs, as and I don't dislike Paprika, but
Paprika is cute and everything.
She's kind of a one-trick pony.
Yeah, I get you better get used to her saying the name Kokona over and over again, because that's what she does all the time. Like, that's most of her dialogue is just saying Kokona's fucking name over and over again.
Just a soundboard of her saying it in various inflections. Yeah,
the voice actress did have a really easy job on that show. Just saying. She, like I said, she's cute, she's nice, she's adorable and everything, and she's like a nice counterpoint to Kokona, just in terms of how her character is structured and how she acts and what she does. But there's not really much development to her. Like,
yeah,
she's more interesting for her past and everything, and the same counts for Dr. Salt, who is the head of the Flip Flap organization. Like, the Flip Flap crew in general is alright, but kind of just there. And Dr. Salt has an interesting part to play, but mostly because, again, of his past, and not really because, his current self and how that is developed. And for Paprika, I sometimes feel like that's the same, even though she's really important in terms of how Kokona is developing. But, you don't get a lot of story beats told from her perspective. Like, the show is mostly about Kokona, and in certain parts about, her relationship to Paprika and what that means for her development, her relationship to Yayaka and what that means for her development. But it feels like, okay, we could have had something more in terms of, Paprika. Especially since, she seems to be one of the main protagonists, and it's like, okay, I wish there was a bit more there. And same goes for the eventual villain of the show, who, besides having an interesting twist to her character and an important background story in terms of how it relates to one of the other characters in the show, is a bit flat beyond, what her role in the past means, and how that relates again to the present. It's like, okay, I know what this character is about, but she's just here at this point to be the villain, and we don't really do so much with that. It's not super bad or anything. It's just like, okay, there could have been a bit more here, and especially in terms of character relation, everything. But it's kind of nitpicky, from me. It's not like, oh, this is bad or anything. It's like there's just a bit of a nagging feeling in the back of my brain that's like, if the show had more episodes, we would have seen more interesting stuff about these characters. And, especially the background stuff of the villain and, the character development of Paprika and everything. It's like something that I feel like fell under the wagon because of the show's runtime and or because the writer changing and or because they, wasted some time on unnecessary characters and everything. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad show by any means. It's just many elements are left very wanting.
Yeah. So I enjoyed the show a lot. You might think from the nitpicking I did just before this, but that I had some serious problems with it. But no, I was captivated in the beginning by the visuals, and later when the story kicked in, I was like, okay, I really want to see where this goes. Like I said, it stumbles a bit in the middle, and in terms of some of the characters, but I think it still comes together very well in the end. So if at some point you are watching the show and you're like, okay, I don't know if I like where this is going, I would still suggest, like I said, it's a 13-episode show. Stay through to the end. I was very satisfied with the ending, just in terms of emotional payoff and everything, and how the characters came together, and the character stories came together and everything. It all made sense. It felt like, okay, this is the logical conclusion to this and everything. So yeah, and if you add to that it needs a surreal setting and coming of age story with all the cool fairy tale and magical girl fantasy action beats and everything, you got a great show on your hands, in my opinion. I thoroughly enjoyed Flip Flappers. I think it's a fun little show. Could it have been better? Sure, definitely. But what we got was still pretty damn cool. And I really suggest, if you are interested in a kind of unique, maybe not a super unique story, but a kind of unique setting and visual style and everything, check it out. I just really enjoyed what the show had to offer most of the time, and it sounds like that was the case for you as well, John.
Yeah, definitely.
So if you are discouraged by its barrier of entry, just in terms of how the story is, structured and everything, and how the episodes work and everything, see if you can feed on its visuals until the revelations and the plot kick into gear. Like I said, also great opening and ending. I recommend the show. And if you, want maybe some of, want to read some analysis on maybe some of the more, surreal metaphors and everything in that show, there's probably a bunch of stuff to read on that at this point. I think there are some great episode reviews on ANN for that. And I think there are actually 2 reviews. I think there are the streaming episode reviews, and there's another review of the whole series by 2 different people. So yeah, bunch of stuff to read if you want to dive more into that, and if you feel like, okay, I didn't really get what that part of the show was about. So yeah, Flip Flappers, highly recommended. It was definitely, even though it stumbled at certain points, one of my favorite shows this season. And yeah, really liked it. But speaking of favorite shows this season, there is a little something we have to do this episode.
Yes, there is.
Best of the season. So yeah, of course, we got a new segment where we pick our favorite show from each season. So, John, you wanna tell us what your favorite anime series was from fall season 2016?
I think I'm gonna have to go with, and I know this will be a shocker to everyone, Sound Euphonium.
Yeah, no big surprise there. I mean, the last episode already
got me in all of the feel. So I felt good watching it. It was a fun show. The music was beautiful. It was everything I wanted and more.
Even though you weren't expecting how the ending turned out, apparently, but it was still like...
I still thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right, that's great to hear. Okay, Sound Euphonia from John. I had super trouble deciding because there were a lot of shows in the season I really thoroughly enjoyed. Diamond is Unbreakable, of course.
That was definitely one of my contenders too.
Yes, and Keijo, I did not expect it to enjoy it honestly, wholeheartedly, not ironically, as much as I did. Flip Flappers, like we just said, also one of the shows, flawed maybe, but I thoroughly enjoyed that as well. But I think my favorite show this season has to be Haikyuu Season 3. Because I think it's such a great culmination, at least until this point. Of course, there will be more seasons, but this is kind of what the show has been leading up to from the beginning. And those were, having the big match, like an entire season worth of a match against the opponents that were at least set up from the beginning of season 2 as, the main goal and, the final opponent, and had seen it come together in such a riveting, super well directed, fantastically animated way with great music, great character moments, just overall fantastic sports anime. I love Haikyuu to death, and I think that's probably its strongest season. So yeah, I must give the award for best anime for this for fall season 2016 to Haikyuu personally. So please, if you want to sound off in the comment section or send us an email, we would love to hear your favorites from fall 2016 so far. And I know that's maybe kind of sad, but we haven't we have barely received any comments or emails on our show. We know we have dedicated listeners at this point. We can tell from, the episode downloads and everything. So if you are like kind of, I don't know if I want to write these guys about something, please, if you want to sound off on why you liked another show more, please tell us why. I personally, and I think John feels the same, would love to hear, your thoughts on, this shows from fall season 2016, please. Or anything you want to tell us about, or, about our show. Constructive criticism is always welcome. We always would like to improve ourselves, and, if you want to tell us something about that in that regard, please write us as well. If we get an interesting email from you, I'm more than willing to read it on the show. We don't have a mailbag section yet, but that might come. So
talk to us. If you got mean things to say, we can handle it.
Yeah.
but no, seriously, like CC was saying, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. We'll listen to your difference of opinion. We're all ears.
Yeah, and maybe we'll discover something interesting about shows that we watched and maybe dismissed in some point that we didn't know about it. And, maybe we're like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that was a part of the show that was super good. And yeah, so please, I'm always willing to learn more about, the shows that we watched. And maybe see a different side of it and hear different experience from other people. Really interested in that. So yeah, don't refrain from sending us your input. And that's it for Anime Brain Freeze for fall season 2016. We'll see you on the next episode with our sneak peek for spring season 2017 and our first review of winter season 2017. So until then, stay fresh, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
And that is a wrap on the 27th episode of Anime Brain Freeze. All the music in our show is from the Double Dragon Neon soundtrack by the amazing Jake Kaufman. Please go to vrit.bandcamp.com and check out his awesome work. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and animebrainfreeze.com. Leave us comments and questions any way you like, or send us an email to animebrainfreeze@gmail.com. We would love to read your feedback. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you had a good time, and please join us again on our next show. Macht's gut.
Peace easy. Next time on Anime Brain Freeze,
we enlist the endearing services of a maid
with a truly draconic demeanor.